Hello, story time. So this is the ethical asshole, and I am your host, the salty bitch. My name is On Imagination. I was talking about perspective soup in my last video, and I'm like, oh, we're going to dive deeper into this one. This is going to be a thing that sticks around forever, is perspective soup. In 2001, right after 9/11, there's just no nice way of putting this. My owner was an attorney from New York City who had groomed me, prepped me for trafficking, and I was his escort for about 5 years. I could not get away from him, and I had a really bad case of Stockholm Syndrome. People think Stockholm Syndrome is being in love with your captor, and it's not. Stockholm Syndrome is believing that, knowing in some cases, that if you do not act like you love and support your captor, you'll die. So it's a kind of self-preservation. It is not fucking love, and it's not being in love with your captor. It is surviving. And if surviving means kissing their ass and doing whatever the hell they want and glorifying them and pretending to be whatever the hell they want, you do it to survive. That particular person valued logic above all else. And if I couldn't outlogicize him, he owned me. That was the lesson. That was the be-all, end-all of how he kept me enslaved, was logic. It was really important to him that I was logical. So I was punished if I was not logical for 5 years. And every time I tried to free myself, it would end in an logical argument, and he would outlogicize me. And between the Stockholm Syndrome and the logic, I was convinced that if I could not out-argue him and logically prove why I should not be with him, then I could not leave. And it took me 5 years to finally find the argument that would free my reasoning and my mind from him. At that time, he was 50 or 55 years old, and I was 20. He had found me when I was 15. And it was right after 9/11. And the way the conversations usually went is he would give me the floor to say what I wanted. He would listen. And then he would take all of my words, weaponize them against me, manipulate the conversation to distort my meaning using logic. And I learned that if you don't say the right word, I learned real fast just exactly what words will and won't do for you. And it took me 5 years to finally master this skill. So that in 2000 and, well, actually it was January 2002. It was literally January 6, 2002, where he was doing the usual listening to me. I was speaking. He was observing through the conversation around. You said this, you said B. So basically what it is taking your words and using your phrase, using your sentences as premise, and then drawing conclusion from the premise, and then from that, proving it here, calculating, okay, here's the conclusion, therefore, so you say this, therefore it means this. So there was this one particular discussion we had, and for the first time I listened. And while I was listening to him, and he was on his soapbox, and he was tearing me down, I had this shift in perspective. It was extraordinary. All the philosophical training, all the educational training finally paid off. I was listening to him demean me, berate me, and I shifted. I was here underneath him, and then I moved, and I got to step and zoom way back. And I saw suddenly the whole situation from an omniscient point of view. And I heard wah, 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 wah for the first time. And I realized he was looking at the truth. And he was giving me his interpretation of the truth. But his interpretation of the truth was built off of his five senses, which is subjective, which means it's just an opinion, a translation of the truth. And I felt my freedom come to me. I felt his control completely vanish in that moment. And I said, everything you say, and everything I say, and everything every person in the world says is just a perspective, observing truth, and then trying to articulate and translate that truth. Except there are logical fallacies and religions, traditions, cultures, all obstructing our visibility to that truth. So that while I'm looking at the truth, I also have a lot of these filters, like Rorschach prints, placed between me and the truth. So I can't tell the truth because I have all these obstructions in my way, like Rorschach prints, that change what the truth might be, that I can't even see because I've got all these Rorschach prints in my way. And in that moment, I learned how to remove the Rorschach print and see the truth. That we all are just standing on these pillars, these points of views, these single points, looking at truth through Rorschach prints. That you're over there looking at your truth through a Rorschach print, and I'm over here looking at mine, and everybody's sitting there on their own pillar, observing the same truth without any of us having the science of knowing how to remove those Rorschach prints. But that day, I figured out how. And suddenly I realized I can remove the Rorschach prints, all the traditions, all the religions, all the cultures, and I can see the truth. And the truth is that our perspective of truth is subjective. And suddenly his opinion was no more valuable than mine. And I said, it's just your opinion. He blew up and he screamed at me. I don't even know what he said. I just heard screams, and I heard wah, wah, wah. And I went, and that is your opinion. And he screamed and raged and ranted, and that is your opinion. It's just your perspective of the truth. It's not the truth. And just like that, his control over me, his hold over me, the Stockholm syndrome, all of it just vanished instantly. And it literally, he went from being this massive giant over me to nothing. And I was free. I was so free that day. That's how I overcame Stockholm syndrome. That is something I refer to as the Rorschach print perspective. It is a theory and philosophy that I developed January 6th of 2002. And that became the foundation for the work that I would pursue for the rest of my life. Perspective science. Truth. The science of truth. And I became obsessed with studying the Rorschach print filters and the truth, measuring the truth, and then working to remove the perspectives or the filters out of my perspective so I could see and study the actual truth without these filters. And then I discovered that math, physics, logic, chemistry, biology, which are founded on logic, math, physics, chemistry, biology, are the foundation of what defines the truth. That way you always have a metric to determine what is the truth and what is not, because truth is constant according to mathematics. It's never changing. Now, a person's calculation of that truth can be wrong. And that's where you need to step back and go, give up your ego. Is your calculation wrong? And this is why we do checks and balances and all the science work we do. But when you're working with 7 sciences and they all align, check, 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 you got the truth. And this is why you need to be using the different sciences to literally conduct checks and balances, so that if you're wrong on a calculation, you can double check your work based off of the other sciences. So the sciences all need to be working together, integrated, so that you can weigh in the truth and measure it properly. And when you have 7 sciences all aligned saying, yep, this is the truth, this is the constant, you got the truth. It's called consistency. And I used that metric to literally remove all the filters. I was able to use psychology and philosophy to identify confirmed bias and remove it. And I realized the closer I get to truth, the more I stand with truth, the more right I am. Not because I'm right, not because I'm wrong, but because I'm going to put my faith in what is right. That way, I always have perspective relativity to truth. And I submit completely to truth. I am impartial to what truth might be, but I'm going to stand by it, no matter what it turns out to be. So I learned how to prioritize truth above all else. And that's when I realized you have yourself, perspective, and truth. Now, the more perspectives you have, the more truth reveals itself to you. Then you use that relativity to measure truth to the self, so you know who you are. That's how you find out who you are, is you have to first know truth. That way you can measure the truth to the self. That way you know who you are. But in order to do that, you require a massive amount of perspective, and that is what education is. Education is the science and the transmission and the science of studying what truth is, to give you the perspectives, all of the perspectives, literally making it a perspective soup. That way you have the ability to assess the truth, measure the truth, define the truth, find the truth, and discover it. That way, you not only have the truth, which is the core foundation of all, but it also allows you to see it with a clear eye that's unbiased. Now you have the ability to measure yourself. So it's this beautiful scope of the self and relativity to the truth. But your visibility is a big, big factor in this. Now, there's another part to this. Not only is it visible, you also have to have the power of transmission, the ability to speak and communicate it to others. So that's where communication skills come in. You can look at it all you want. You can know what the truth is. But if you don't have the ability to communicate it clearly, you're not going to be understood. And it's the ability to communicate that opens the doors so that you can connect with other people. You don't master communication and you're not going to be able to connect with other people. You're going to stay within a closed community, if you even have a community. People who don't know how to socialize don't know how to transmit. That's part of the education. So education revolves around who are you? Because if you can't find the truth, if you don't know what the truth is, then you're not going to know who you are. You must know who you are in relativity to the truth. You must be able to measure you and the truth. But in order to do that, you have to have a clean perspective. Education allows you multiple perspectives, strong perspective, optimized perspective. And we're going to call it optimized perspective. An optimized perspective is a perspective that is clean, clear, functioning, unobstructed, highly visible. But you're also going to need the ability to communicate what you have, what you see. That way, you have the ability to connect with other people. You put this together, and it is one of the most potent, most powerful educational tools you can possibly have. A true warrior teacher does nothing but teach this. They teach how, they teach why, they teach what, when, where. They focus on the self-authority of the student. They focus on the independence and empowerment of the student, so the student can learn this gorgeous perspective soup, take that information, and forever be independent, so they always can assess, is my perspective clean and clear? Do I see the truth? Do I know who I am in relativity to the truth? And can I communicate my ideas based off of that truth in relativity to myself? You fail in these 5 things and you don't have a society, you don't have a civilization. Everything falls. It is dire that every human being knows these 5 skills. Because if you can't do this, the United States Exhibit A. Thank you so much. May the kindest of words always find you.